I came out to my son even before I came out to myself. So the very first time I was
Hmm.
hearing it in my own head was as it was coming out of my mouth, talking to my son.
Wow.
I came to realize that I'm probably on the autism spectrum. It's not easy to connect with other people, but that doesn't make you less lonely when you're not able to. I feel like
Hmm.
coming out was one of those unlocking experiences. You suddenly realize that there are parts of you that are hidden away, and that changes your brain forever. It required turning my back on a whole lifetime and to think about who I am and how do I relate to the universe. I quit a job and they wanted me to stay, and I was like,
Introduce yourself without talking about what you do or what you have.
I'm a very thoughtful person, a very considerate person. I very much like to get to know beyond the surface level everybody that I meet. And I try to be the kind of person that makes you feel good about being with me so that you feel comfortable in your own skin. And it makes it possible to have that kind of connection. That's the kind of human that I want to be. As I've gotten older, especially, I've come to appreciate that more. At some point or another, I came to realize that I'm probably on the autism spectrum. And one of the things that comes with that is it's not natural and easy to connect with other people, but that doesn't make you less lonely when you're not able to. And so,
Yeah.
one of the things I've
Yeah.
realized about my son, who's also on the spectrum, and that's how I found out through his testing, is that it takes some extra support for him to make him feel like it's worth the effort because it is a lot of effort to make those kind of connections. But as I've gotten older and I've learned
Yeah.
more of those skills and I've gotten better at practicing them, I found myself being more and more successful at being able to connect. And I've found some of the people that I've most enjoyed being with have that kind of energy that makes you feel safe with them, that they're a comfortable person to be with. And you feel like it's okay to let down your guard and be vulnerable and to not be perfect. As soon as I recognized this and was able to like put it into words, uh, I kind of made a resolve to like learn how to do that myself and to be that kind of person.
I'm glad that you brought up being on the spectrum. Some of the things that resonated with me that you said was that just because it's hard to create connection doesn't mean you don't
Mm-hmm.
need it, that you don't feel
Mm-hmm.
lonely. And I think that is a misconception of people who are on the spectrum, that we don't we're okay being
Yeah.
alone. Being around people who you can let your guard down and be yourself is sounds to me like people where you can be
Mm-hmm.
authentic and they can also be
Yeah.
authentic.
Yeah. Very much. I find it a
Can,
huge turnoff to feel like somebody's putting on an act and, trying
mhm.
to force me to see them a certain way. Um,
Yeah.
and as I've gotten older and more wary of these sort of things, I find I have less and less patience with it, which doesn't mean I'm unpleasant with this person, but I'm able to detect it and I'm like, okay, this is a relationship that does not have a future. If I can't get past this with this person, if this is how they feel like they have to behave or they wish to behave, then I'm going to invest my energy elsewhere.
There's something about that, about wanting that authenticity from them, not putting on the act, that I think also kind of ties into something that is reality and the truth are so important, to the point that um, like like I'll find myself wanting to understand how things work or why things are the way they are, even when there's no clear benefit to that. It's not
Mm-hmm.
practical, but it's a strong desire. Does that resonate? And do you think that is part of why you want to be surrounded with people who are authentic?
I think it's not universal, right? It's selective. One of the things you'll commonly
Mm-hmm.
see among people on the spectrum is a hyperfixation on certain ideas or topics or subjects. Very often, this is, novels or sci-fi or gaming, or there'll be something that this person like really gets into,
Mhm.
and you'll have somebody who's barely verbal, seemingly, and as soon as you mention Doctor Who or Magic the Gathering or Tolkien or whatever their thing is, you will literally not be able to turn them off. They will
Mhm.
talk over you to finish their thought because they just can't help
Mhm.
themselves to finish that thought. I used to do this all the time, but I wasn't aware of doing this. And my
Mhm.
wife, who's neurotypical, would watch this happen with this kind of puzzlement because she saw the interaction and she saw the other person like they clearly are not interested in having this conversation, and they're clearly feeling stuck in this conversation because Andrew won't shut up, and he doesn't see it
Yeah.
himself like clearly because he wouldn't do this if he
Yeah.
realized how uncomfortable this other person was. And she'd point it out like afterwards when we're alone of like, did you notice at all that this other person really was not into what you're saying? And it's like, what do you mean? It's complete news to me. And my son will do this, and every other autistic person I've met, sooner or later, you'll get in conversation with them where you find their thing, and it's flipping a switch. On the other hand,
Mhm.
try to engage them in a topic that they're not interested in, and it's like they will even respond to you in the most basic way, depending upon what skills they've learned and where they're at in their journey of learning how to,
Mhm.
what's usually called masking. This idea of putting
Yeah.
on an interface that other folks can
Mhm.
interact with in a successful way.
Yeah, and it's I like the term masking, um, especially in the context of this conversation around the
Mm-hmm.
authenticity, right? Because authenticity doesn't mean that you're just always unmasked and just like, okay,
The,
that's not
yeah. The
practical,
way that I
right?
think about it, the way I talk about it is the mask still has to fit your face, right? You can't just put
Mm,
on anybody's mask because it won't fit you. So when
yeah.
I'm a professional photographer these days. And so a lot of times I find myself in very complex social situations. I'm at a wedding, it's a gay couple. Dad is, from the Air Force, and he's not okay with his son marrying a man. And he's barely holding
Mm,
it together. And the son and the dad have a very bad relationship. And you can tell this is an actual thing that really happened to me. And I'm kind of in the middle of it because I'm the guy who's doing the family photos in the midst of all this.
yep.
Um,
Mm,
so dad's not supposed to be in the photos, but dad's sitting right there. And when they say all the
yeah.
family, and what do you do? Um,
And you're the one
yeah,
having to
exactly.
like
Stage manage this whole
corral
thing.
people
Yeah.
and stuff. Yeah.
Or I
Awkward.
arrive at the venue. I've been hired to photograph candidates at an event, and it's the most prestigious and expensive country club in Denver. Like they own
Mm,
20 city blocks in the middle of Denver.
wow.
This is
Wow.
a fancy place. Everybody's got gold and diamonds and the gowns and the tuxedos and the whole thing, right? I can behave correctly in that scenario, whether or not that's my natural way of behaving. I can also show up to a
Hmm.
campground in a state park. Bride and groom are in camo, and I can handle that situation too. Also, not my natural environment.
Yeah.
But
Yep.
I picked the right mask out of the closet, and I'm able to bring myself into that social situation and pick up on the verbal cues, pick up on the language that people are using to talk to one another. Um, I'll even unconsciously kind of start using the same idioms and dialect that people will be using in whichever place. Um,
Hmm.
and I'm not trying to put anybody on. I'm still projecting who I am through the correct lens, the correct filter.
Yeah.
Um, because again, people know when you're putting them on. That's something most people are very aware of. So if you're not being authentic, then it backfires and it blows up in your face, and it seems like you're mocking somebody by mimicking them. Uh, on the other hand, if you're putting forward a version of yourself that fits into this puzzle, then you click into place and you're part of the event. You belong.
Yeah, the way you put it made me realize that just because you're putting on a mask to adapt, like you said, it's an interface. If to like use a
Mm-hmm.
computer science
Mm-hmm.
paradigm, right? Like it's like an interface to an API, but that mask is like, yeah, to use computer science, like it's like you've got a interface and an API, but the underlying service is still
Mm-hmm.
the same. Like the underlying service has the same
And you can implement
policies, the same
multiple
rules.
APIs on top of the same service, right?
Yep, that's
Calling
right.
from this language or this environment or whatever, you present this way. If you're getting in this other environment, you present this other way. Um, you see this called code switching for people who have mixed
Mm-hmm.
heritage.
Yep.
So, you have a
Yeah.
Latino background, and I imagine
Mm-hmm.
if you are in an environment where you're required to speak Spanish, I know that's a big switch from what you do in corporate America, right? Your
Yep.
dialect, your
Totally. Yep.
accent, your whole nature almost changes. I've had Black friends who had experienced the same thing. When they're home with their family, they speak differently, even, and their
Mm-hmm.
personality shifts a bit to fit with
Mm-hmm.
the culture and the family and the environment that they're now in. But when they go to their job in the bank, they code switch
Mm-hmm.
again and they put on a different version of themselves.
Yeah, and I think even for people who are in the mainstream of the culture that are white Americans, they still are going to talk differently at
Mm-hmm.
work than they are with their
Mm-hmm.
husband or wife or with their kids. And I think with the core of like when we talk about authenticity, we're talking about that underlying bit, not the interface, but
Mm-hmm.
we're talking about your values, right? And the decisions you make. And in a sense, even it's funny because the way you're talking about this, it makes me realize that even the interface is authentic in a way. It's authentic to the people that you're
Mm-hmm.
interfacing with. And it's authentic to you because it's, like you said, it's your version of that
Mm-hmm.
interface. But I think where the line probably gets blurry is when you start to then shift your values to match other
Mm-hmm.
people.
Mm-hmm.
Is that right?
Yeah.
And
I mean, I grew up in New England in the 1980s and 90s, and um, it was not a great time for queer folks in that part of the world. And I, as a consequence, I think, didn't realize, accept, acknowledge even to myself that I was bisexual until I was in my mid 30s, um,
mm,
because there's no benefit to that, right? It was a very dangerous thing to do socially, and I was
yeah,
perfectly happy dating girls. So why create trouble for myself, even in my own brain? But
yeah,
that wasn't authentic, and it
yeah,
felt wrong, and I felt frightened of sex or sexuality for a long, long time. And it wasn't until
yeah.
my own son was a teenager and kind of coping with puberty and feeling out his own kind of way that it became important enough to me to face my own inauthenticity towards myself so that I could create a
Hmm.
safe space for him to not have to go through that. And that was the beginning of that
Wow,
realization for me.
wow,
And it's been 10
yeah.
years and I'm making a lot of progress, but I think there'll be still pieces of this that I'll be picking at the whole rest of my life.
That's so powerful. That desire to create a safe space for your son, create a safe space for yourself. Is
Mhm.
that right?
Yeah, that was kind of a
Because
very beneficial unintended consequence.
it's a beautiful one. I think, and part of the reason why it was so important for you because like just for people's context, you are and at the time were in a
Hmm.
monogamous relationship, heterosexual relationship, and
Hmm.
still are and were
Hmm.
at the time. And people would say, well, why would you need
Hmm.
to
I got that
come out as
question a fair bit. Yeah.
bisexual when you're yeah, I believe that it becomes like this emotional drag when you cannot be, you know, true to yourself, when you can't be authentic, when you can't admit things to yourself, when you can't admit things to the closest person in your life
Mhm.
about your feelings, it becomes a drag on you and it becomes a drag on the
Mhm.
relationship, and it holds you back. Is that what you were
To
experiencing?
a large degree. I came out to my son even before I came out to myself. I found myself saying things and explaining things about my life experience that I had not thought about before. So the very first time I was
Mm-hmm.
hearing it in my own head was as it was coming out of my mouth, talking to my son.
Wow. You must have a really good relationship
I
with your
do,
son
I
that you
do.
could be that vulnerable. That's awesome.
It's a peculiar one because both being on the spectrum, we don't do things like neurotypical people, but I think we really do.
Do you both just dive into the deep
Yes,
end a lot? Yeah, like you and I do that
yes.
too, right? We
My,
just
my
go
son and I
straight
don't
into
do
the
small
deep
talk.
end.
That is not a thing. Like neither of us
Yep.
like
Mm-hmm.
particularly enjoys
Yep.
it, and he
Yep.
has no ability to do it at
Yep.
this moment in his life. He'll get there sooner or later, I'm sure, but not
Yeah.
right now.
Yep.
So we'll start in on the deep end of some philosophical topic, or give me a brain dump on how
Mm-hmm.
corporate accounting works because that's what he's studying. And I'll drive him back to school, which is about an hour from where we live, and yeah, we'll have these like you know 3 levels deep on the encyclopedia kind of conversations, and that's what we do. In fact, for Father's Day, we don't really do gifts and whatnot. I mean, it seems kind of ridiculous to me, but I'm autistic. What we do want to do is encourage thinking about what the relationship means, what matters. So for his mother on Mother's Day, he'll write a sonnet explaining something he particularly values about her. And he was really struggling because in the past he's just bought me a gift he thinks I would like, or whatever. And I was like, yeah, don't
Mm-hmm.
bother. I mean, this is an invented holiday. It's ridiculous. So what he wound up
Mm-hmm.
saying is, it's difficult to know what to say to dad because I'm trying to remember his exact words. In fact, I have his exact words right here. So this is my wife saying, I was helping Cameron brainstorm potential Father's Day things he could do, and he was saying that it was too hard to say the important stuff, and he didn't want to say the light stuff because, and now this is my son's words, I remember dad for deep things. It's hard to be light when you feel that way. He's the foundation. It's hard to be light about your rock. And that, I think, is a pretty good summary of our relationship. That there's not a lot of
Yeah.
inconsequential light things in our relationship, but there's a lot of very deep things.
Mm-hmm. And so you were having this conversation with him, and it was
Yeah.
effortless to do that because
And he was
you go
12
so
at the
deep.
time, like just starting puberty. He's 21 now, so
Wow.
it's been a little while. But even then, it was very natural and has continued to be very natural for us to have these very thoughtful, very deep conversations. Um, it could be about the history of Middle Earth, or it could be about human sexuality, or it could be about whatever. But that's where the conversation always goes, pretty much right away. Yeah. So having come out to Cameron, I then like had this revelation to cope with in my own brain. Like, what does this mean to me?
But that's so wild, though. Like, sorry, I just have to pause because that's so wild to me. It's usually the other way.
Yeah.
It's usually the other way
No, not so
around,
much.
right? Oh man. Oh, that's great. I love it. I love that so
And then, of
much.
course, that became a conversation with my wife, who actually is pretty important consideration here. Somebody has to be involved in all this.
Of
Um,
course. Yeah.
and her reaction was, "Well, you still like girls, right?" Like, yeah, no, we're good there. It's fine.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. She's like, okay, I can.
um, and then I think I told a couple of other people, family and maybe a close friend or two. And then I just kind of sat on it. And I figured, okay, I've figured this out about myself. That's an important revelation. And I'm not going to change my relationships. This is how I want my life to be right now. So I guess that's it. And
Yeah.
then as, a year went by, 2 years went by, I found that I was really uncomfortable just sitting on this information. Um, and in a certain sense, it felt disingenuous or inauthentic to hide this part of myself when it was relevant to be shared. Obviously, Um, you don't just walk around announcing private information about your life. I wound up feeling increasingly closeted, that I started feeling actually a little frightened of, is this information going to get out of my control? And is somebody going to learn about this
Mm.
in a context or in a way that may puts me in a bad light or doesn't give me the opportunity to be understood, to be clear about what this does and doesn't mean to me? And so in the end, I decided I would write a blog post. And so I decided I would just talk about the lived experience of coming out when you're 30 something years old to your 12-year-old son, and what that kind of does and does
Right.
not mean for my life right now. Um,
Yeah.
and I kind of did a test drive with this, with some of my friends, especially some of my friends who had come out themselves. And I kept persistently getting that question that you asked before of like, well, why are you doing this? Like, what difference does this make? Are you
Mm.
going to like start seeing other
Yeah.
people or what? I mean, what's this for?
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
and the answer is it's for me.
Exactly. It's so interesting, right? That there's this association of like there has to be some
Hmm.
action that follows or behavioral
Hmm.
change or, like you said, it's for
Yeah.
you.
And one part of it, and I spent quite a lot of time thinking about like, okay, well, why are you doing this? Actually, a very good question. Like, you should have a good answer to that.
Mm-hmm.
And I wound up writing like a second half of this blog post, which is, why the hell are you doing this?
Right, yeah. it's very Amazonian of you. Did you have a whole FAQ and everything?
Almost, not quite.
Yeah.
And the answer kind of came down to a couple of different pieces. One, I didn't want to feel like somebody's going to learn about this when I wasn't ready for them to learn about this, through some back channel in some way which has a negative connotation or implication to it. I didn't want to get outed. If somebody's going to out me, it's going to be me, and I'm going to do it on my own terms. Um, Two, it's I grew up feeling like I had to be ashamed of this. I grew up feeling like
Mm,
this is a
yeah.
terrible way to be. Um, you know, the butt of every other joke was some gay joke when I was growing up. And
Yep.
I don't want the world to be that way. And one way to combat that is to, I think this is where people get confused about what Pride is all about. And it's, funny that it's June and Pride Month right now. Pride Month is not about being proud that you're gay. It's about refusing to be ashamed that you are gay,
Mm,
right?
yeah.
I'm not proud that I have brown
Yeah.
hair, but I'm not ashamed of having brown hair either. But
Hmm.
nobody makes me tries to make me feel ashamed of having brown hair. People do try to make us feel ashamed of being queer, and that's not okay.
Yeah.
And the more of us that stand up and say, that's bullshit, and we're not going to let you do this to us, this is not a
Yeah.
shameful thing, the harder it becomes for people to feel okay doing that. I'm a real person. I'm an admirable person. I do a lot of good in the world. And you can't honestly look yourself in the mirror and say, that guy is horrible because he was born in this way with these character traits or this physical reality that he has to contend with. And the more people see that, the more and I don't mean people who are going to be hateful. There's people who are going to be hateful. It doesn't matter to any of them
Yeah.
what you do. It's the people who never really thought about it. It's the people who are innocent bystanders. And the more those people can make a personal connection and say, I know somebody who's bi, and they're actually a really nice guy. So all this rhetoric about bi people being unfaithful, I've been married 25 years in a monogamous relationship,
Yep.
having
Yep.
to have one of each. No, sorry, just one relationship, right? I mean,
Yeah.
all of this is
Hmm.
maybe true for some people, but it's not true for everybody, and you can't just generalize. And
Yep.
we see a lot of hateful things being said about trans people in all sorts of places right now. I'm like, okay, well, ask yourself, do you know any trans people? Are they awful humans? Right? If the answer to the first one is no, then you've really got no information to go on, and you're going to have a hard time seeing trans people as other humans. And as soon as you meet one or two trans people, and you probably already have, and you just don't know it, then all of a sudden you're like, it's not trans people, it's Joe, or it's Susie, or it's, it's that person, it's that individual person that I now
Yep.
know. And they did me a good turn last week, or they were super nice to me when I was lost in the building that I was trying to find an office in, or whatever it is. And all of a sudden, it's harder to other them because
Mhm.
you know them, they're real to you now. And so I think the more of us are
Or
out,
they
the more people know, the less we can be othered.
absolutely. I was gonna say it's not just they were nice to you, but or maybe they weren't nice to you because they had a bad day, just like all the rest of us
Exactly.
do when we're having a bad day. We're just human beings, all of us. And I love that, and I love what you're saying about basically you're talking. There's two big things you're talking about here. It's like one is shame, and the other one is
Hmm.
visibility. And I think that's what pride was supposed to
Hmm.
be about, right? It was supposed to be about not being
Hmm.
ashamed, and and then it's supposed to be about being visible. People think of visibility as you're shoving your lifestyle down my throat, but what you're arguing is I'm saying be visible so people can see that we're human beings
Hmm.
too. And we don't have to conform to your version of what a human being
Hmm.
looks like to be a
Right.
human
I mean, it's
being.
like television in the 1980s. There might be a token Black person or a token Latino on a show, but they were always typecast, marginalized, never the main
Mhm.
character, never, always kind of disposable in a sense.
Still true to some
Uh-huh.
extent, but
Still
yes.
true to a
Yeah.
alarmingly large extent in a lot of places,
Yep.
but it
Hmm.
is improving,
Yep.
right? We do see a number
Yep.
of um, Black actors, Latino actors, etc., holding positions of importance, right? Main characters. I mean, I just was watching DS9 again for the umpteenth time. And Captain
Hmm.
Cisco,
Yeah.
a phenomenal character,
Absolutely.
thoroughly
Yeah.
admirable captain who deals with all sorts of very difficult
Hmm.
things in heroic, courageous, compassionate ways, right? And
Yep.
I think in my life, he was one of the first Black characters that was so centrally placed. And I
Hmm.
think that show did a particularly good job of, without hitting you over the head with it, and in the typical Star Trek kind of sci-fi way, giving a moment to Black stories and to Black culture
Hmm.
and to emphasizing that these are people, right? And growing up New England, where I knew like exactly two Black people, I had no experience
Hmm.
of this. I had no context. I was very naive and very ignorant. And that was one of the first things I remember that was like, oh, okay. I mean, you learn about it in history books, but it's not real to you until you meet someone like Captain Cisco. And you're like, okay, he's a really awesome person. And now
Yep.
all of the assumptions and prejudice, unintentional, unwanted, but it's still there. You still pick it up because that's what's in the environment that you grew up in, um,
Hmm.
starts to come apart.
That's a great example of how visibility is
Hmm.
helpful, like visibility in the media. And then Deep Space Nine also did a lot of that too. It did it like the first officer,
Hmm.
Major Kira, right? And then there was also
Hmm.
Dax, who was not explicitly transgender, but had been different genders in
And
different lives,
bisexual.
and bisexual, yeah. And then there were the semi-visible the doctor and I'm spacing on names right. This is so embarrassing, but you know who I'm
Dr.
talking
Bashir.
about, the Kardashian and the doctor. Garrick.
Oh, Garrick, yep.
Garrick, yes, we all know Garrick was
Hmm.
the slight, not obviously, but like we're almost we weren't quite there where they could have an outed
Yeah, I
gay
think
character,
we would
but
call him gay coded.
um, there you go. Yes, exactly. That's the lingo now. You were talking about when you're talking about that visibility. I want to talk a little bit more about. You've probably heard of bi erasure, and I feel like that's what we're talking about, but not talking about. It's like the elephant in the
Yeah.
room, right? Is that like And this is an interesting thing to just to explore because there's this expectation, like you said, if you're bisexual, then that means that you're going to have two partners. You can't be
Hmm.
monogamous, and then the flip happens too, where people will say, "Well, you're not really bisexual because you're in a heterosexual
Hmm.
relationship. So how can you really be
Hmm.
bisexual?" You know, and so it's
No,
it's
I'll one up you
it's like there's this
on that because I've
confusion.
never actually had a
Yeah,
relationship with a guy. Right? I figured this out about myself
there you
once I
go.
was 15 years into a marriage. So if that
Yeah,
attitude is correct, then I'm, misrepresenting myself. But I think that attitude is completely missing the point. You could be a
yeah,
celibate monk and you might still be gay. That has
hmm,
nothing to do with it,
yeah,
right? It's all about
yeah,
what your body, what your mind, what the combination of the two finds attractive. There are
yeah,
hundreds of women that I have found attractive that I have not slept with. There are hundreds
right,
of men that I have found attractive that I have not slept with. It has nothing to do
yep,
with your actual history of relationships. It has everything to do with what works for you, what gets you excited, what is arousing. And that's in your head, regardless of your sexual history, regardless of what anybody else likes to think about it, one way or the other.
yeah. I love this as an analogy for so many other aspects of self identity and authenticity. But before I talk about why that is, as another example to what you're saying, straight people know they're straight before they date or have sex
Mm-hmm.
with anybody. It doesn't mean that they're less straight because they've never had sex, they've never been on a date. They're
Mm-hmm.
still just as
Mm-hmm.
straight as the person that
Mm-hmm.
did, right? And so this leads me to the parallel that's universal, which is that be comes before do and
Mm-hmm.
have. But as a society, we tend to put do and have before be. We say, oh, you do this, therefore you have that, and then you
Mm-hmm.
become this, right? So, like, oh, if you're bisexual, that must mean that you go and have, bisexual relations, and now you have bisexual partners, and therefore you are
Right.
bisexual. It's the
Yeah, it's
wrong
all
order
backwards.
of understanding, right?
And
Yeah.
to be fair, and to put things in their proper historical context, it is true that for a while it was very unsafe to be gay, and men would
Hmm.
make every effort to conceal this, often by having relationships with women, sometimes with their
Hmm.
knowledge and consent, sometimes not. And sometimes they would find they just really couldn't cope and they couldn't take it anymore. They'd go have a relationship with a man, and that they would then call themselves bisexual because they couldn't in their own head
Yes.
commit to, actually, I really just am not interested in that. And
Hmm.
that was a
Yep.
common enough phenomenon where
Yep.
gay men who had fully kind of processed their own internals and figured things out for themselves started to see bisexual as being code for, I haven't actually figured things out for myself yet. I'm not willing to like actually understand myself and know what my preferences are. So there's one aspect to why there's this lingering, and I don't see it
Yeah.
nearly as much as what I have heard from
Hmm.
my friends who are been in gay social circles a lot longer than I have. Um, yeah, that seems to be diminishing over time because it's much less of a thing now. But that was a real thing for a while, and so it's understandable that there's
Yeah.
a historical baggage that kind of comes with that. And even the term bisexual, right? Is it bisexual or is it pansexual? Which are you? Well,
Hmm.
if I were to take what I see as the predominant way that people are now at this moment, 2025, using those two words, I would properly categorize myself as pansexual. Like, gender is not particularly important to me in how I find somebody attractive. Um, However, that word is fairly newish, and bisexual has been around a long time. So normally, when I'm identifying myself outside of the queer community, I'll use bisexual because that word is at least understood. And if I use pansexual, then most people are like, "What the hell is that?"
Yeah. Well, I don't know if you know this, but I think it was in the 80s the bisexual manifesto was written, and it clearly stated that bisexual means attraction to more than
Yes.
one gender.
Mhm.
So it's the same as pansexual. I think pansexual is kind of redundant, but anyways, we can this will create a debate in the comments. I would
Well,
love
and
that
that's
if we
the
got a
thing is
debate going
it
in the
always
comments.
creates a debate in the comments. Like I have had this debate
Yeah.
more than once where I'll use either term.
Yeah.
It honestly doesn't matter which one you use.
Uh-huh.
Somebody's going to take
Yeah.
umbrage that you're using it wrong. And the only thing I can say to that is language is fluid. And we are
Hmm.
constantly changing and evolving what we mean by different things. And before we as a culture had processed the existence of trans people among us, had always been among us forever. But we didn't want to acknowledge that. And people studying human sexuality in a thoroughly academic, kind of professional sort of way had not wrapped their heads around it. And they didn't have good terminology for it. And it wasn't part of the language of psychology of sexuality. And so, up until that moment in the literature, there were two genders. Literature is wrong. Don't harass me because I get it. I understand. But in the literature, that's what
Yeah.
we had at the moment. That was the level of human understanding. Now we know better. And the term bi, which we know means two, starts to feel kind of weirdly off.
Hmm.
And we can,
Yeah, and
with
that's
this
fair.
bisexual manifesto and in other ways, try to clarify okay, the thing we always meant was,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
and then the other term, pansexual, came around because somebody's like, yeah, but we should just have a different word that's less confusing as to what we're talking about. And now it's even more confusing because now we've got both.
Yeah. Yeah. So I want to go back to go back to you. You came out as bisexual for yourself. You know that it's important to not feel shame and to be visible. How does that relate towards the idea of self compassion, self acceptance, and then your ability to connect with others? How has it had an impact on those things?
Oh, it's been a tremendous impact. It was the first step in me unpacking a lifetime's worth of, New England Puritan kind of baggage around sexuality in general.
Yeah, I feel that one. That's so heavy. I mean, I'm not New England Puritan, but I know that like lifetime baggage of shame
Yeah.
around
So
that, right?
for the first time in my life, I felt like I could talk about sex with even my wife, with anybody, without feeling this sense of deep embarrassment. Um,
Yeah, because if you talk about sex, those thoughts will creep in, and then you're like, oh, oh, oh,
right,
push it back
right.
in,
Because I've
right?
been used to saying this is a
Yeah.
dangerous thing to talk about, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so
And so hold on, just right there. So would your wife pick up on that before you came out that like there was something a block there, or did you feel it?
I don't know. I certainly felt a block, and I certainly felt a lot of embarrassment. And I mean,
Mm-hmm.
even with your intimate partner, if you're having trouble expressing what's working for you and not working for you, what your needs are, what your desires
Mm-hmm.
are, um, then you're not going to get what you want if you can't ask.
Absolutely.
Um, so there was a lot of miscommunication about what each of us wanted out of an intimate relationship and what was working and not working because at least for my part, is very hard to talk about. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
she's been better about that in general, I think, throughout her life. So I don't think it was as much a difficulty for her. But if it was hard for me, then it's hard for us.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then researching my own situation, of course, brings you in contact with the whole LGBTQ kind of umbrella community in general. So a lot of, I got into watching YouTube videos on, just different, you know, gay or bi or trans or queer of one kind or another um, content creators and just talking about themselves and their experience and what matters to them and you start developing a deep kind of empathy and understanding of why people are so motivated to pick a path which is hard.
Mm.
Um, being queer is hard because it's not the normal usual thing. And even if we had full support in society, it still would be hard because uh, if you're a man and you want to date other men, there's just many fewer men who are willing to date you because they mostly want to date women, right? That alone,
Mm-hmm.
even if all the rest of it wasn't there, would still be hard.
Yep.
And that's not the only thing, of course, because yeah, it's far from the truth that that's the only problem. So if you are choosing to be gay, much less choosing to be trans, where you have to decide for yourself, do I want to take different medications and hormones and surgeries and this and that and the other? Which of these options are going to make me feel the right way about myself, right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
not every trans person makes the same choices about these different options. And that's all very legitimate. It's a very personal choice.
Yeah.
Um, but it's still a hugely important and a very difficult decision. Like, which of these things are going to matter to you? Which of these things are going to
Yeah.
help you feel like yourself? So, if you're going to choose that for yourself, it makes no sense at all to do this on a whim, to molest girls in the girls' bathroom. I mean, really? Is you're going to go through all that's ridiculous. um, no,
Yeah.
if you're going to go through all this, you're going to do so because there's something so profoundly important that you are
Mm-hmm.
willing to face all of that because it matters that much. And as I started to understand that, you can start to have a great deal of honestly admiration. Um, I
Mm-hmm.
being a photographer, I was doing a boudoir shoot with a trans woman this past weekend, and she's undergone modifications to her body to be who she wants to be and look the way that she wants to look and feel like herself in her own skin. And boudoir photography is a very intimate kind of thing. You really do get to know somebody very intimately, and yeah, just to see the journey that she's been through to get to where she is now. That she's willing to have very intimate photographs, paid to have very intimate photographs taken of herself,
Mm-hmm.
um, and to celebrate who she is now, right?
Yep.
That's an amazing thing. That takes an incredible amount of courage.
It's a great example of self acceptance. I wanted to mention though, it's like you were saying that the push to be authentic, to show up authentically, can be so
Mm-hmm,
strong that we are willing to face massive rejection on a societal
mm-hmm,
scale because it's more important to us that we align our outward lives with our inward
mm-hmm,
lives.
mm-hmm,
And in this case, like, and as you were talking about that, like, I have trans friends, I have trans
mm-hmm,
lovers, etc. Like, I'm very familiar with the journey. One of the things that I draw an analogy to is I grew a beard. I put minoxidil on my beard to make it grow better, and I work out at the gym really hard to become, in shape, and I take testosterone replacement
mm-hmm,
therapy to do all of that, and it we all are working really hard to, trans or otherwise, I'm cisgendered, but I still am working really hard to get my outward appearance to feel authentic to what I am
mm-hmm,
inside. And that's all that, transgender people are doing
mm-hmm,
as well, is they're on that journey. It's just, it's a lot
mm-hmm,
harder. It's a lot more
mm-hmm,
work. And again, that drive to be authentic. So going back to you, like that drive to be authentic is so strong that even in, in the middle of your life, in the middle of being married and all of this, you're going to come out and you're going to say, this is true to me. What did your self acceptance and self compassion look like before and after all of this?
I mean, before having preferences for sexual activities, which are not purely masculine top kind of activities, was deeply humiliating, even in my own head. Like I wouldn't even want to admit to, and
Mm-hmm.
certainly not ask for that or try to engage in that kind of activity. And I'm much more comfortable with asking for what I want, even if it's not the like normal kind of thing, very vanilla sort of
Yeah.
sex. I was unconsciously very concerned about appearing effeminate in any way. Um,
Mm,
for me, I'm kind of present very masculine, but feel more neutral, right? I would
mm,
think of myself as, if you're looking at it as spectrum, feminine and masculine as two ends, kind of more in the middle-ish, leaning more masculine. Um, but I would want to be way over here because I felt like that's the only socially acceptable place to be. Um, so I carry what you could call a purse everywhere. I've got my iPad in there and I've got some chapstick and I've got my headphones and my car keys and, you know, I don't like having shit in my pockets and I don't want shit in my hands. So
you got a man
sure, great,
purse.
whatever. What do you call it?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but I would be
Yeah.
so embarrassed to be thought of as carrying a purse
Mm,
beforehand. And now
mm-hmm.
it's like,
Yeah.
not only do I carry a purse, I've got a rainbow keychain on it.
Nice.
So you can think what you want. Um,
Yeah.
Having longer hair. I used to keep my hair very, very short. Like that was, and men have worn their hair long
Mm-hmm.
all through the centuries. It was not at all a, it was a, I feel safer this way kind of thing. Like I can't be mistaken for
Mm-hmm.
being effeminate in any way. Um, Gesture, mannerisms, allowing myself to be close to other men, giving hugs, especially to other men. All of these things would make me super uncomfortable beforehand. And now I do all of those things as a matter of course, and I don't think twice about it. It took me a while to get there. It was not automatic. But when
Yeah.
I came out to myself, it gave me permission to start re examining my attitudes about each of these stupid little things one at a time.
Yeah, and all of those things seem so small, but like when you add them up, they're a big part. I mean, I don't actually, I shouldn't say they're small. Like human affection is so
Hmm.
important, And not being able to express that affection in a way that feels authentic to you, man, that's
Hmm.
hard.
Yeah, and it is
It
tiny
must
little
feel like
things,
isolating.
but the aggregate of them is every single day you're kind of have this tension to be masculine, to be the right kind of man. Um,
Hmm.
and I don't know, I think being bi, you're kind of already taking a middle course and saying, gender is not that big of an importance in my life. It's not a construct
Hmm.
that deeply
Yeah.
matters to me. And, again, it makes sense. Like putting in its proper historical place, reproduction, you don't get a species if you're not good at this. Like this is baked in deep to every single species
Hmm.
that still exists because the ones for which it was not buried deep, they don't exist anymore. So all of us
Hmm.
have it. It's baked into us as a species, but as individuals within the species, there's lots of variation. And uh, yeah, I find it's just not a construct that makes a profound difference to me. And having realized that my own attractions kind of went to wherever, not really detached to gender, started to realize that my own preference is about myself. Likewise, don't really attach too much to what people's expectations of gender are. Um, and there's still a lot that I kind of probably need to unpack and think about because I'm still just in the habits of a lifetime of acting a certain way and being a certain way and dressing a certain way and grooming myself a certain way and
Hmm.
all of those things, right? So, um, in my own head these days, think of myself more gender queer, gender non-binary. I don't know what the right term is, um, but I still look like a bloke. I still sound like a bloke, and I'm not going to change that. At least not at the moment. That's not a thing that matters to me that much. Um, but I can definitely have a feeling of solidarity, empathy with trans people because I think it's a matter of degree. If I could choose, I might be more gender neutral. If I could just like magic myself into what I want to look like. But there's a path
Hmm.
between here and there. And is the destination important enough to me to want to travel that path? Not at the moment. That might change. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but
Yeah.
I can totally get it that for other people, the urgency to get to that destination is so great that almost no path seems like it would be too daunting.
Oh yeah.
And that
Yeah.
I sympathize with on a very deep level.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the urgency can change over
Hmm.
time. I have a good friend who was identified as a cis woman, a lesbian, and now they're 60s. They came to this realization that they are non binary and
Hmm.
pansexual. And these things can change over time, and maybe they didn't change. Maybe it's just the understanding of what was going on underneath changed
I
over
feel like
time.
that's my
And
situation.
yeah,
Is I've been very good at suppressing, you know, forcing myself to think of myself in
mm-hmm.
a certain way, and the more I
Yep,
relax about it, and the more comfortable I get
yeah,
listening to my own workings, the more it's, oh, I've always been this way, right?
mm-hmm.
And I'm learning to know myself.
It's like breathing air. You're just so used to
Hmm.
it, you don't recognize what it is, what what the feeling is of it, what it's like. It
Hmm.
just is, and sometimes you need these contrasting moments, like you did with your
Hmm.
son, that
Shakes you out of it.
then was like, oh wow, I'm trying to describe air to you, and you're looking at me like, oh
Yeah.
wait,
Yeah.
right. We haven't talked about rejection because that's like a big part of this process of figuring out who you are. You know, first off, like the reason you get disconnected from who you are is because you've rejected
Hmm.
yourself because you're afraid of rejection, right? Societal
Hmm.
rejection. So you reject those parts of yourself. So then you start to integrate and like
Hmm.
reverse that rejection internally. But then as you do that, now you start to then potentially face other rejection
Hmm.
externally. And maybe even internally too. You might face new rejection internally too. Can you talk about that? How rejection has shown up in this journey for you?
I mean, honestly, I've been incredibly fortunate that it hasn't been a big part of my journey. Having come out as an adult with my own funds, my own house, my own family, my own everything, right? Um, I'm not in the situation of being a 15-year-old living with my parents and being existentially dependent on their
Mm,
willingness to meet me where I am. So for
yeah.
me, coming out didn't have any kind of existential dread that I would not continue to be a successful adult, um, which
Yeah.
I imagine must be part of that calculus for um, a decent number of young people who are coming out, that they suspect, they fear, they know for sure that their parents are going to
Mm,
be, react badly, and that there's a very real possibility of rejection in their future. Fortunately, I didn't have to go through that. I was very lucky in my circumstances. I haven't had any friends overtly snub me.
you probably unconsciously surrounded yourself with those people. Or maybe it's not even unconscious, it's just the type of people that you surround yourself with happen to be tolerant and understanding. Let's talk about rejection in other parts of your life. We all have, where we've had to stand in our truth and in our values and had to face rejection. The rejection can go both directions,
Hmm.
right? That's I realize that my values have changed about what I'm looking for in my career, and so I might need to reject this path and take another one. Can you talk about that?
Sure, yeah. I'd say the most dramatic and difficult was changing careers about what, 2022, so roughly 3 years ago. And I went to school. I taught myself to write code when I was like 8 years old, and I went to school for software engineering and went off, got a job doing software engineering, and stuck with that for like 20 something years. So it was great that you opened this conversation with, except for saying what you do for a living. How do you identify yourself? We get so used to just saying, oh, well, I'm a insert job name here, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is what I am.
Mm-hmm.
Well, kind of, not really. That's what you do. And it may be that your
Yep.
personality and your interests align deeply And so there is an aspect of I am a one of these, but that's not all, not really.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Now, it's true, I am an engineer in so many aspects of my life. The kind of
Mm-hmm.
meticulousness, the kind of systematic approach, the kind of let's be creative and invent solutions with what's at hand, like all the things you think of, you know, Scotty or Geordi or Chief O'Brien, the
Mm-hmm.
engineers from Star Trek,
Yep.
right? The things that they have in common as engineers, that's totally me. Um, I totally
Mm-hmm.
identify with those characters. But I'm also a photographer, which means I have a deep sensibility about people because I'm a people photographer, right? Especially I'm a boudoir photographer and a wedding
Yep.
photographer. So really getting how people see themselves and really getting how to show them that way, understanding art history, understanding composition and color and light and all of the artistic aspects, understanding sensors and lenses and optics and all the technical parts that come into it. Right? That's me too, right? All of those things are important. Um, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a freelancer, right? I have to run the whole show. I have to figure the things out. And when I don't know how to do them, I have to be honest enough with myself to say, you don't know what you're doing, man. You got to go get help. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and the extent to which I am able to be successful is either the extent to which I figured it out in time before I screwed it up completely and failed, or I went and got the right kind of help in time. Right. And those are really your only two
Mm-hmm.
answers. And figuring things out is very slow and very expensive. So usually the better course is to go get help. Um, and you have to get over your pride. You have to get over your, you know, any sense of embarrassment that you didn't already know how to do this. Like, how would you? But that's a thing. Um, for me, I grew up in a family that's pretty poor, so I have a lot of hangups around money, and spending money always feels super scary. Even when I can convince myself that it makes sense to do that, it still feels scary to do. Uh, and so a lot of being a freelance photographer has to kind of come back to overcoming all of those sort of things. So changing from one to the other, right? Going from saying I am an engineer to I am a photographer uh, was a very painful transition. And it required a lot of unplugging circuits and wiring them back in a different way. Um, and it required turning my back on a whole lifetime, really, since I was a little kid, of pursuing this one activity and finding like a different thing to
Yeah.
do, and a different way to be, and a different way to think about who I am and how do I relate to the rest of the universe. Um, and I quit a job that I was employed at, and they wanted me to stay, and I was like, sorry, I can't do that.
Can we talk about that moment actually? Because I think it's really important to talk about what 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 was this moment of like I've been doing this for my whole life, and it's like suddenly, oh wait, whoa, like this isn't authentic to me. Was it like that?
Almost. I started programming because I liked making things. Right. It's always been about the creativity, the artistry of it. I mean, I value and prize my ability to write really beautiful code. Right. If you're a programmer and you come and look at code that I've written, it's composed rather than
Mm-hmm.
merely written. I spend a lot
Yeah.
of time thinking about all of the little details, getting things exactly right.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yep.
and increasingly, I found that this wasn't really valued and appreciated in the work that I was increasingly being asked to do. And a lot
Mm-hmm.
of it came down to increased pressure for output and productivity and delivering things faster. A lot of it came to that the industry itself has changed quite a lot. I learned how to program before there was such a thing as the internet. So you can just well imagine like how much things have changed. You barely write any code on your own at all. And you're just downloading a bunch of packages. And what you write, if you write anything, is just gluing them together. And I found increasingly frustrated and bored and artistically unsatisfied, right? This is no longer a creative thing. And
Mhm.
nothing against plumbing, but I felt like I was being asked to be a plumber. And that was not a job I signed up to do.
So it's not that you had a sudden realization about your values. It's just that your values and reality started to fall out of sync. The reality of that career path started
Yeah,
to
but it's
fall
still like
slowly
boiling a
fall out of
frog
sync
kind
with
of
you.
thing, right? It didn't
Mm-hmm.
happen all at
Yep.
once.
Yep.
But there did come a point
That's right.
where I had a particularly nasty interaction with a colleague, and I had a whole weekend of panic attacks, like out of nowhere. I'd never had
Oh
a panic
wow.
attack before. And it's just like the whole weekend, one after another after another. I spent the whole weekend completely non functional. Um, and I don't know if you've ever had a panic attack, anybody listening, it is the most awful
Mm-hmm.
feeling ever.
Mm-hmm.
It's like being metaphysically shot through the brain. And you're just in so much agony, you can't even function. Um, I called out on Monday. No, I was going back to work. As it turns out, I happened to have a doctor's appointment because I was changing practices or something. So fortuitously, that was the case.
Oh, that worked out.
And my wife, of course, was very concerned, and she came along, and I mentioned this to my new doctor, who's meeting me for the very first time. Here's this functioning adult, um, and they did a psych evaluation, and I almost was not allowed to go home because they were so concerned
Oh
about
wow.
me that it's like, well, okay, since your wife is with you and you're going home with her, we'll let you go home. Here's some medicine. Take these if things start getting too bad. I talked to my boss, and this is at a startup, so it's a very small company. It's the CTO of the startup. He handled the whole thing very gracefully, deep understanding. I took a leave of absence. We figured out the terms of how that's going to work. He let me stay on the medical plan that I was on, even though I wasn't working, and it was an expense to a company that had limited funds, right, being a startup. So they were fantastic. I can say nothing but awesome things about how they handled the situation. Um, and that bought me 6 months to kind of start to figure things out. And I tried to see a therapist, but she was super busy and didn't really have time in her schedule. And I didn't know enough to like say, well, I should just go find somebody else who does. And so I had maybe 5 appointments at 4 to 6 week intervals with this therapist. Um, and again, I think the extent of the relationship limited what she could do for me, but the extent to which we had a relationship, she helped a lot. Um, and in the course of all this, it was really bad for me to just be sitting by myself in the house all day. So I decided, well, I'm going to pick up a camera again in the first time since forever. And I wanted to get like a actual camera that has, manual mode and interchangeable lenses and like the whole thing. And I started to get really, really into it. And, I'd share my photos online and, whatnot. And a friend of mine who's also a photographer said, you're really good at this. You could do this professionally. So I sort of took her at her word. And little by little, I started doing headshots and family photos and, bigger and more, complicated things and learning a lot technically, learning a lot artistically, learning a lot about running the business, learning about the interpersonal side of things. And yeah, little by little, kind of built up a photography practice, which, 2 years in is profitable. It doesn't support my life yet, but we're getting there. It's a business. They grow over time. Um, I just hired a business coach, so we're going to work on a lot of those kind of things. I'm rebuilding my website and incorporating everything I've learned about marketing and whatnot. And it's a journey. And you keep learning all the time, do a little bit better each day. Um, and yeah, it's stressful being an entrepreneur. It's stressful being a freelancer. That goes with the territory. But the experience of being in the moment doing the job is profoundly rewarding. Like nothing I've ever done before. Like this is what I was meant to do.
Mm-hmm.
Even having really loved building programs and writing code and being an engineer, I love this even more. And I need to figure out how I can make it profitable and work for me, like so I can keep doing it. But
Yep.
There's absolutely no question of whether this is what I want to be doing.
What do you think is the core pieces of who you are that make this a better fit than what software engineering has become today?
I think it's fundamentally more creative, that it is necessary as a photographer, at least the kind of photography that I do. I'm working with weddings and events and portraits of various kinds. So, headshots and branding portraits and maternity and senior pics and, stuff like that. And then the boudoir stuff, of course. That requires you to figure out how you're going to represent this situation, if it's an event or a wedding, this person, this person's body in this intimate setting, whatever it is. Um, what's the combination of technical things, lighting and camera settings and all the rest of it, of interpersonal things? How do you get them in the right mood so that their
Mm-hmm.
expression, their body language communicates who they are? If it's a couple, their couple body language, right? Individuals have their body language, but couples have their own body language as a couple. How do you get them
Mm-hmm.
to relax and be able to authentically show what they are as a couple? Um, I especially love working with queer couples for this because uh, there's always this extra dimension of like, is it safe to be seen as being a queer couple in public? And I
Mm-hmm.
haven't yet met a queer couple that is 100% as comfortable as a hetero couple in public. There's always that
Yep.
glance around, like I have to be
Mm-hmm.
aware of my environment before it's okay to do this. Um,
Yeah.
and being able to create an environment where they can actually feel as safe and comfortable as they do when they're alone, so that we can capture the kind of images of them as a couple that reflects what their relationship, what their couple body language actually really is. And especially if it's their wedding, I hear repeatedly from my wedding clients that they really specifically want a queer photographer. Right? And it doesn't matter where exactly in the rainbow you fit, right? But it's got to be
Yeah.
somewhere there.
Somebody who understands those
Mm-hmm.
challenges.
And most especially that they
Um.
don't feel judged, even if it's in their own head,
Yep.
even if they're not being judged, even if it's a
Yeah.
wonderful
Mm-hmm.
ally, straight photographer who wants nothing but the best for them and is fully supportive. There's still that
Yep.
nagging kind of, I don't know, I'd really rather.
Yeah. Totally. What are you doing now to make sure that what you're doing stays aligned with what's authentic for you? Because it seems like for a while it drifted, right, with the frog in the pot with the
Mhm,
career and then with the
mhm.
sexuality. I'm assuming that you now are much more proactive about, and what does that look like?
Um, Part of it is hiring a therapist. Um, One of the things I especially appreciate about my therapist is that she's very good at noticing when I'm up in my head and I'm not paying attention to what I'm feeling. Um, she's very good at slowing me down and saying, "Why do you have that opinion? Why do you think that? Where does that come from? Um, what
Mm-hmm.
part of you, if you know about parts theory and how that all works, it is adding that to your internal conversation. Like, where's that coming from? Um, and I think that's really super helpful to as a grounding, as a way of being honest with where are you at and what's going on. And I don't know that I'll see a therapist forever, but I think I'm learning a lot about how do you think about introspection, how do you think about yourself. That I will definitely keep and continue using, even if I feel like I'm done with my immediate need for seeing her. I think having come out, it's like learning your second language. From that moment on, you will never look at grammar the same way again. All of a sudden, you are conscious of how languages are put together in a way
Mm-hmm.
that just learning your native language will never teach you, because you're not aware of learning any of that crap when you're learning your native language, right? You're teeny tiny and you are thirsty and you're like pointing at the milk jug and milk, 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 and that's how you learn. And you don't know that you're learning language, but the second language that you learn it changes your brain forever. So all of a sudden you get it that there's this whole other way of being. And I feel like
Mm-hmm.
coming out was one of those unlocking experiences where you suddenly realize that there are parts of you that are hidden away and that you've now opened up this one little compartment that has this one little aspect in it that you weren't aware of before. But now you know there are hidden compartments,
Yes.
and that changes your brain forever.
Yes. Yep.
And you start to get
The closet door
curious
has been
about
opened,
what
and
are
now
the
you
other little
realize there's lots of
compartments.
other closet
Exactly.
doors. Yep.
So I think that's a transformational thing that helps you be honest with yourself. And in a lot of ways, I find I gravitate to queer folks because we've all gone through that experience
Mm-hmm.
where we've had to have this realization about ourselves that we're not just like everybody else. And this isn't the
Yep.
only way to have that realization. And I'm totally not saying that. There are many other ways to have that important experience in your life, even if you're not queer. But knowing that somebody's queer, you know that they've gone through that and that that's a commonality that you're going to share with that person and that they're at least that much more introspective about their life and their situation. And they've gone through that little piece of a journey. And yes, I've met plenty of queer people who are not very self aware and have a lot of
Right.
learning to do. But they've at least figured that part out. And that has helped them start that journey. And, I've met lots of straight people who also have done a tremendous job on this. Um, but it
Yeah.
is kind of a bias, I guess, that I've kind of adopted.
It's one of the few privileges of being queer is that we are very aware of the closet
Yeah.
door, and the thing that Alok, this social media influencer, was talking about, how everybody's in the closet. There's something that people, when we're conforming to societal expectations, we're in the
Mm-hmm.
closet, and but as queer people, we don't have the luxury of being able to ignore that as
Mm-hmm.
easily. So it sounds like your process is that you have an accountability coach for your to keep you accountable to what's authentic to you, your therapist. And it sounds like if you don't have your therapist, you could probably have other
Mm-hmm.
people in your life that can be that. And the other one is that you're now aware of all the closet doors and you're finding new ones all the
Yep,
time.
exactly.
Yeah, that's awesome. Um, we're a little bit over time. I wanted to ask you a couple last questions. First one is, if you were to fast forward 10 years from now, what would you tell yourself to make sure you don't forget about this journey of, finding those doors and staying true to yourself?
What would I today tell my future self or the other way around?
Yeah. Yeah. What advice to ensure that you don't go off the rails 10 years from now?
I think the single most important thing I've learned from my therapist is to ask the question, why did you think that?
Mm,
Because there's so often that we'll be in the hurly burly of everyday kind of events and something will happen and we'll say, okay, well, clearly this is the right thing to do. I'm going to go off and do that. Um, yeah, but why? Why was that? Why was that the
mm,
answer? What other things
yeah.
might you have chosen? Right. And so often I know I get stuck with, okay, it's either this way or that way. I'm definitely doing this. Yeah, Andrew, but wait, hold on. Really? Only two? That's all the probably not. So I think that's the single most important thing that I would hope I don't forget. Why did you think that?
Stay curious about
Yeah.
why you have the thoughts and the views and perspectives you
Mhm.
have. I love that. Thank you so much for joining me today and doing this with me. I love the direction we went. I love how you were able to share your story, about how discovering what's true for you with your sexuality and your career has helped you get better at living an authentic life. Where can people find you if they want to connect with you?
The easiest is my website as a photographer, because it's got a little schedule thing and it's got my email address and all that. So yeah, that's authenticmoments.co.
Awesome. We'll add it into the details for the show. And thank you so much, Andrew, for joining me and the rest of the crew
Yeah, my
today.
pleasure.